Howdy y'all, Andy here, and welcome to King's Comics. As we start 2019 off, I realized that I haven't gone over which comics I actually gathered for and throughout December of 2018. I know we just wrapped up my haul, my collection videos, but today is a December 2018 haul video as we head into 2019. That being said, I counted, and I think I had about 24 collected volumes that I gathered in all of December 2018, but I'm going to go over those today because I had about 74 single issues, the single edition copies that I gathered in December 2018 as well. That would take way too long to go through, so today I'm just going to focus on the hardcover or trade paperbacks that I collected throughout December. Let's go. So first and foremost is DC Metal. I did a review of this recently, and I gotta say I just really loved it. It's an awesome run. It's just a lot of fun, and I can't recommend it enough. I finally managed to get some time to read it last month, and it blew me away just by how much care Scott Snyder poured into it, as well as Greg Capullo, the artist, just poured into this, and all of these years of writing Batman had paid off for the team. Then we go into some classic comics I've been trying to read. I've just managed to find them through Goodwill and half-price books and on the darker corners of Amazon and eBay. So I managed to find Batman, the Bride of the Demon, as well as, let's see, these are some fun ones. Let's see, Batman, Death in the Family, and the Death of Superman. Now, a lot of these, once again, are classic runs. I just haven't had a chance to read them myself. I'm trying to go through a lot of backlogs on things, so hopefully I'll have some kind of retro reviews for y'all later this month. And then, actually, this is funny. As I've tried to mention, I try to be very involved in my church here in Austin. Well, my church is actually in a small town called Hutto, north of Austin, where I live. But either way, I serve in the youth ministry at my church, right? And one of the kids in my youth ministry, he bought me, besides a book on dating, he bought me Infinity Gauntlet. And this is embarrassing, but I have never actually read Infinity Gauntlet in its entirety. I've read Infinity by John Hickman, I've read Secret Wars by John Hickman, a lot of Avengers, but I've only kind of read bits and pieces of Infinity Gauntlet. That's kind of where I'm at in comics, where I read just a lot of comics, I mean around 1,000 comics, but at the same time, there's just so much out there that sometimes I have to speed read or I have to skim over things. So this is awesome that he bought me this. His name's Nate, and Nate, if you ever watch this, man, I love you so much, and thank you so much for getting this for me. Next up on my kind of list of retro comics, older runs I've been trying to go through is X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. This one's by Chris Claremont, and he actually worked on it. In a previous video, I went over a Wolverine comic that he wrote with Frank Miller, and this is a classic. This is a classic X-Men issue. X-Men collection where the X-Men are forced to team up with Magneto to face a common threat. At least I believe that's what the summary is. I can't wait to read this, as well as the other. Well, I can't wait to dig into all the issues I'm mentioning, all the comics that I've been mentioning in this video. Then we have, I've mentioned several times that Rick Remender is one of my favorite authors of all time, that usually I'm going to pick up whatever he puts out. So as part of that, I had alluded to it in my collection video earlier, but I got the chance to pick up volumes 5 through 8 of Black Science. And Black Science is a fantastic series. I just love it a lot. It's just this very much darker exploration of sci-fi, as well as how we're our own kind of worst enemies when it comes to scientific discovery, as well as the fact that we often don't consider whether when we consider whether we can do something, we don't really consider whether we should do it, in that kind of old, I guess, adage of how we should proceed or how our morality should guide our decisions. It's wonderful. I love it. I think it's concluding this year, and I can't wait to see where the author and artist take us on that journey. Because I mean, I've been reading this comic for years. I think I've been reading it I think I might have started reading it when I was in college, but either way, it's just been a fun trip. I think that they're up at maybe around 50 issues in at this point, releasing monthly. So yeah, that's about 3 or 4 years down the line for me. Also by Rick Remender, I have Seven to Eternity. I've read, I think, the first issue of this, and it's in this world where you have this god of whispers who he can basically make people promises or make people wishes, something that's on their heart, and through that he kind of makes all these relationships and builds up power for himself to take over the world. It's this interesting blend of like just sci-fi and supernatural elements. Is kind of something that I like. Is when sci-fi and supernatural gets to be married together in comics as well as just literature in general, or media, I guess. So I can't wait to check this one out, or to read it in its entirety, and to carry on with the run. To carry on with the run. Because I think they've got I think Rick Remender's got 2 or 3 volumes out of that right now. The dude puts out a lot of work. Once again, he's written for Marvel and DC. Actually, I think he's written for DC. I know he's written for Marvel. I need to, once again, there's a lot I don't know. There's a lot I need to explore, apparently. Then we get into Bone. This is actually a classic comic. I need to do a whole video on Bone, because for a while it was on a censored comics list, I believe, even though it's tailored more towards children and young adults, but I believe it has a lot of maybe more quote-unquote mature elements in it, like smoking and alcohol, that for a time weren't considered appropriate for youth, which I understand, but at the same time, it's this interesting it's this interesting cross-section of, I guess, just literary culture and what it's taken to get to a point of what censorship can do to art. And seeing this today, being able to just find a copy for like $1 in half-price books was fun, because I've never read the series myself, so let's go. And then we get into, for those who are familiar with Neil Gaiman, the author of Sandman, as well as Coraline and the Graveyard Book. I mean, the dude writes a lot. But and Stardust. He has written for Marvel a couple times, and one of his works was Marvel 1602. So in this kind of collection, he, as y'all have kind of maybe come to figure out, I love alternate takes on heroes, and in this collection, he has an alternate spin on just a bunch of Marvel heroes, the Marvel Universe, as if they were in the kind of this Victorian-esque era in 1602. So we get characters like Spider-Man, Wolverine, Daredevil through the lens of this kind of medieval-esque portrait being painted. Once again, I haven't read it. That's just my understanding, having seen different pages and screen caps coming out of this. So I love being able to actually enjoy it in its entirety for the first time. And then we get into Hicksville by Dylan Horrocks. I think he's the author of, oh gosh, he's the author of one of the books in my collection, Sam Zabel and the Magic Pen. But I'm going to be honest, I'm going into this one blind. I heard about it through a friend. I recognized actually not even through a friend. I just think I found it on Goodreads or something, maybe online. But yeah, I recognized the author's name, so I decided to pick it up just to give it a shot. It was $1 in a clearance bin, so I thought I would pick it up. I mean, guys, a lot of the comics I've shown you today have cost me less than $10. So, I mean, like the past several ones have cost me $1 to $3. So, I mean, and I'm blessed to have been able to pick them up. But never be afraid to poke around, not just online, that's easy, but just, I mean, at garage sales or at thrift stores. You'll always be surprised what you're going to find. And once again, always go and support your local library. Even if you don't think you're going to like a comic or a book that you find there, it's a great way to just explore different books and ideas. Like, I don't just read mature comics. Sometimes I'll dip into maybe subject matters that I'm not familiar with or I don't know enough about, not just for comics, but books. But I'm rambling. Go to your public library, check thrift stores, shop local. Then we get into Powers by Brian Michael Bendis. So, if you've heard the name before, I've brought him up a couple times. Brian Michael Bendis has written Daredevil, Spider-Man. I mean, he's working for DC right now, writing Superman. He's written a lot. But he's done a lot of indie comics as well, independent works, and Powers is one of them. In this, he kind of sets up this he sets up this kind of superhero mystery thriller, and I've been kind of this procedural genre, and I think it actually got adapted into a TV show a while back on PlayStation Network or something. It was really downplayed. It was something weird. I haven't even watched it. I just saw promos for it. But this is another one of those series that's kind of under the radar that I've been wanting to check out. Maybe I'll check out 1 or 2 volumes of it, and if I buy in, I'll just go ahead and truck through the whole series, and then hopefully deliver another review for y'all. And then we get into Orchid. I actually got this on a whim. It was like $4 on Amazon, and I got this because I had an idea for a video I want to put out this year, which is I want to put out a video based on, for some of y'all who may not be familiar, there are a handful of musicians who will publish or they'll write their own comics. I got this idea because Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance, this band I listened to in high school and college, and listen to a little bit now, and I listen to his solo stuff. Either way, Gerard Way, this guy, he writes comics. He writes most famously the Umbrella Academy, which is coming to Netflix this year as an adapted series, a series based on the book. So I bought this Orchid because it was written by Tom Morello. For those who are kind of inclined towards music, this is Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine, who also worked on the soundtrack for one of my favorite movies of all time, Pacific Rim. So I've been trying to cultivate and look into comic works that have been written by musicians, and I'm gonna have a video out about that. Just kind of maybe a ranking video or just a rundown of a couple musicians who have written comics. Can't wait for that one. Moving on, this one's called Beauty. Apparently, I allegedly lent this to my mom at one point, and I think she either got it for me and forgot to give it to me, or I gave it to her. Something happened. I have no idea. Either way, my mom I went over to see my mom one day, and she's like, "Oh, hey, here's your comic." I'm like, I have no recollection of this whatsoever. So I'm reading it. So it goes. That was a short summary because I have no idea what that comic's about. We'll find out when we get there. This one is Superman Cal. So this looks like, once again, I love alternate takes on heroes. It's a DC Elseworlds title. I found it for like 50 cents or $1, once again, in a bargain bin. But this is what looks like a medieval take on Superman. Once again, it looks like a short burn. Can't wait to read it. And I also have started to realize through recording videos, I say, once again, as a transitional statement, far too often. I'm saying that with a self-inflicted hope that y'all will call me out on it. Then we go into Batman, Son of the Demon. This is a reference to being son of the demon, as in, I'm assuming, Ra's al Ghul, who is commonly referred to as the demon within the Batman mythos and lore. This is an older comic I just haven't had time to visit upon as well. I just thought I'd take a whim on reading it because I'm trying to pad out my Batman as well as a fundamental knowledge of classic heroes and explore different elements than just the more recent modern runs. I've read stuff like Batman Year 1 and even Batman Year 2, but there are still some gaps in my knowledge that I'm trying to fill, and then make recommendations and reviews for y'all. Next we go into, actually you'll see a bookmark in this one because I've been reading it, but it's Punisher, Welcome Back Frank, that you'll see on the side. But this one is another part of the, let me make sure, I believe it's another episode in the Marvel Max series. I've referred to Garth Ennis's Marvel Max Punisher as one of my favorite superhero comics of all time, even though his Max Punisher comics were this interesting, or some of them were this interesting kind of grounded work where there were no superheroes. It was just the Punisher with a vendetta against real world criminals. However, in this one, it is superheroes are present, but the Punisher is still a force to be reckoned with, to the point that nobody wants to mess with him. I mean, at all. Including the cops and detectives who are sent to work on his case and find out his motives, etc. I haven't read it. You'll see this bookmark in it, which is actually from Texas A&M University, my alma mater. I can't believe I just said alma mater. Either way, I'm still reading it. Hopefully I'll get a review out to y'all. I think I'm a quarter of the way through it. It's been a fun ride. I can't recommend this one enough. If you see it in your library or online for like less than $10, get after it. Then we have Snowpiercer. I got both of these. Actually, I think out of all those that I brought up, these were the only two. This one in particular, The Escape, is the one that the Snowpiercer movie was based on with Chris Evans. And I've already read this one, so I'm about to put it on my bookshelf actually. But Snowpiercer Volume 2 is the one that I hadn't read. I found these each, well, they were pretty cheap, so I bought both of them together. But there's 3 volumes that I know about in the Snowpiercer series. There might be a 4th on the way. I need to double check that. But I immensely enjoyed the first one. It's kind of, I believe it's part of that bande dessinée format that I've mentioned before, this Frank Belgian, Dutch, this European style of comics, and I can't wait to read the second one, see how it holds up to the first. Maybe I'll have to just do an episode 1, 2, and 3 review based on each volume, and then if there's a 4th, we'll burn that bridge when we get there. And then last but not least, I'm really excited about this one, is The Anatomy of a Metahuman. So this one I got recently from my dad for Christmas. And Dad, if you're out there, if you're watching, thank you so much. I love this. This has been on my radar for a bit. I just didn't have the time or cash at the time to buy it. It's basically this idea of what would Batman's analysis of metahumans, that's right, superhumans in the DC universe, look like to Bruce Wayne, to Batman, him being a scientist, a detective. What does it look like when he tears apart and analyzes these metahumans? So Aquaman's lungs, his skin, Superman's eyes, for that, his organelles that lead to him being able to produce heat vision, things like that, all from the perspective of Batman, who's just a normal human with an incredible amount of perception, will, and intelligence. That's one I can't wait to read. I'm super thankful. I think I mention it sporadically throughout these videos, but my dad's the one who really got me into comics just early on in age, but he got me started on Marvel Comics, so it's kind of a big deal and funny because this is a DC comic and he bought it for me just because I read comics all over the place, don't necessarily care about publisher, but yeah, Marvel was what I was raised, Marvel Comics is what I was raised on, so it's awesome of him to buy me a DC comic in a weird kind of twist of fate. Anyways, there y'all have it, folks. I think that was about 24 or so comics, 24, 25 comics that I managed to come across in December of 2018. I try not to just buy every comic I see. I try to go to the library as my first pass, and if I buy comics, it's so that I can hopefully read, recommend them, or once again, if I don't necessarily like them, then I can donate them to a local library. It's cool because my home library in Hutto is pretty small, so when I donate them, hopefully a kid gets to read them or gets to be introduced to comics as well. That being said, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you want me to do, if any of these comics that I presented to you today interest you, drop a line down below. Maybe I missed something as well, whatever. Drop a line down below, a comment, some feedback, some suggestions about maybe what I can be doing, not just to improve the channel, but maybe, like I was saying, if one of those comics that I went over interests you, let me know if I can do a review for it. If you want to just direct line recommendation, some of y'all have been messaging me via social media. Let me know, or hey, even personally, not just in the comment section, if I can recommend anything for you. I love talking about comics. That's why I've got a YouTube channel dedicated to it. I'll do one of these videos again at the end of, either the end of January or start of February, just about anything I came across throughout the month. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about comics, and this has been another episode of King's Comics.